Hey everyone, excited to have you here for another week of Founders Live. And I'm super excited to have my friend Suzie Yorke, founder and CEO of Love Good Fats. How are you doing, Suzie?
I'm good, Danielle. Thanks for having me on your show.
I'm so excited to have you. And in my head, I have to correct myself because I'm so used to referring to you as Suzie Good Fats because that's how I knew the brand when it first launched.
Indeed.
So it's been I've been super happy and just excited to follow along the journey from pretty much, I feel like in that first, million bars or whatever sold, because I remember before I joined the team at Clearcoat, it was Andrew D'Souza's birthday. And at the time he was very deep into the world of keto, and you and your team had helped me send out a few gifts, including that one for his birthday.
There we go.
2017 or so.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for that. And there's so much honestly stuff to cover. And I didn't put this in my initial list of questions, but I thought it would actually be a very interesting place to start because I am very into, or I guess fitness is very important to me. And I take a lot of learnings from that in my business life and my professional life. And so I thought I'd start with all the Ironmans you've done. And what got you? So you've done, for those who haven't read Suzie's LinkedIn little headline, she's done 11 Ironman triathlons, which is absolutely insane. I like to run. I like to bike. I enjoy swimming, but I'm not very good at that. And you do all three very well. What got you into doing an Ironman in the first place?
Well, surprisingly enough, it started the same way that many women in their 20s start off with. Or even my late teens. I just wanted to lose a few pounds. Like, it was literally that simple. I was 20 at one point, 25 pounds heavier than now. And, I graduated, I moved to Toronto. I was a French Canadian and in English Toronto, and I was kind of learning a bunch of stuff. And I was, fish out of water. I graduated in engineering, and I was now working at Procter and Gamble at my first job. And I just started running, once or twice a week. And then I had a little goal. Like, my goal, I remember back then with my boss, is we would be noting up on the wall, like trying to work out 3 days a week and make it to the gym. There was a gym at the office. Yeah. And I just started with little runs, and then, it was a 10K in the neighborhood where I lived. And I remember that was like, I trained hard for that, and it was a big goal. And then I did that. And then I, had like a big, massive brunch after to celebrate, which, so it just started with that, right? Trying to kind of get in shape and kind of get a little bit leaner. And it kind of went from there. It went from that first summer I was running, and then I was like, okay, well, after the 10K, like once you do a 10K, you can do a marathon. Like, it's because it's like starting a company. It's one step in front of the other. And, 10 months before, you're like, well, no, in 10 months, I can't do a marathon, or 6 months or an Ironman. But if you put the right steps and you just focus one day at a time, and you focus on the day that you're at, and you don't try to overthink too much, that, you just, like, in the spring, I would start doing a 2-hour bike ride, and I would need a 3-hour nap because I was exhausted. And then I was scratching my head, like, how am I going to do an Ironman in 4 months from now when, I have to do 12 hours of this and 6-hour bike, and then I have to run a marathon. But it comes together. You believe in all of the principles that we know that apply to personal life, personal growth, work, business, startups, one day at a time, one step at a time. So I was an average athlete. I didn't overtrain because I didn't have time. In my 20s, I had the job and lots on the go. And then in my 40s, when I came back at it, so I did 5 in my 20s and then 7 in my 40s. And when I came back into it in my 40s,
hopefully
single mom, I had like, a VP job, and
we're just waiting for Suzie's Wi-Fi to reconnect. This is the best part of the story. I'm waiting to hear about it. We'll give her a minute or two to reconnect. But if you guys haven't seen, I'm going to pull up pull up the site while we're waiting for Suzie to come back. Let me pull it up right over here. So we're going to get really into it. Why I decided to start with fitness is, Suzie's built an incredible company creating these amazing bars that I've been a huge fan of for the past 3 years. She's going to come back in a moment, but let me share you my screen over here. Oh, she's back. She's back. Yeah. Hello. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. The Wi-Fi just cut out. I'm in Toronto, so I don't usually have Wi-Fi issues. So hopefully you can place that out.
No, all is good. We've had, that's why I like to do it live. We have all different stories coming out, and I was just about to pull up the website. In my head, I'm like, what are interesting content I can talk about when Wi-Fi cuts out?
There we go.
I've had it happen to me incorrectly before too, or like out of the blue. My issue is my laptop. I had it plugged in, but it just wasn't charging. And halfway through the show, I don't know if you've met Jenny Bird. Yeah, so it's interesting. Jenny Bird, and actually her new COO is my co-founder from my last company.
Oh,
yeah. So she just started a couple of months ago.
Oh, and who's that?
Her name is Elena Sahakian.
Okay.
Yeah.
What a small world. Yeah. I'm part of a women's female CEOs networking group with Jenny. She's awesome, and her jewelry is amazing.
Yeah, no, it's so beautiful, and they saved me because even though I was plugged in, I didn't realize my laptop died midstream. And I was like, why is my Wi-Fi cutting out? What's going on? I'm like, oh, my laptop's about to die. And then they luckily kept the show going for a minute or two until I could recharge.
There we go.
But where you got cut off was you're just talking about when you got into Ironmans again in your 40s.
Yeah.
You were a single mom and you were, working a VP job and all that.
So it was just really like the goal, like you often hear it's a lifestyle. Now there's many lifestyles, or like Peloton lifestyle and a whole bunch of, the mirrors. For me, it was just lifestyle. So I would, every 5 days a week, I would do one workout. I would try to swim twice a week for 20 minutes, 30 minutes during lunch. I don't like swimming, just enough to not fall behind too much in the race. And then on the weekends, especially the weekends I didn't have my kids, I could kind of do a long workout and then have a really, great bath and nap and just kind of chill out. It was just part of my routine, and the goal kind of kept me focused because I find now, for the first 2 years that I launched the company in 16, 17, went live in 17 and even 18, I didn't even take a few minutes to go for a run, and certainly wasn't doing yoga. Before that, I was doing yoga daily, like hot yoga. I was addicted to it. So having that goal, even though it's a pretty big goal, was kind of keeping me honest every day. Then I lost that honesty while I focus on love good fats, and now COVID's kind of allowed me to like do what I never thought, yoga in my living room. Like no, I would never do that, and now I love doing that, and I'm back to running, and this summer I'm back to biking.
Amazing. Well, that's been my new passion for the past couple of summers now is road biking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have
where do you ride? Yeah. Like we should chat. We should chat about getting.
I would love to. I'm in downtown Toronto, kind of on the east side near Distillery. And then we have a crew. We'll go out to Port Credit, which is about whatever for people watching, maybe like 20, 30 kilometers west, or sometimes to Oakville, which is about 50, just shy of 50. Or last week we did up north to the zoo. Which is about 25, 30 up northeast. And so, it's fun to do solo. It's fun to do in a group. It's, lots of options. We had a fun actual, not by design whatsoever, just a friend of a friend joined us in the group. And the entire time I was riding, I was like, why am I so slow today? Like maybe I had a late night, whatever. And I only learned at the end of the ride that this guy had trained for the Olympics in skiing. And I didn't have like proper speed gauge on my bike. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's cruising at 30 kilometers an hour on his bike. No problem. Because he was a professional skier. And I'm like, oh, I feel less bad about myself now.
Well, what really saved me is I joined a group of cyclists called Morning Glory in Toronto. It's about 100,000 members. And at 5:40 sharp, the group in the summer, it's like over 100 riders, probably 200 pre-COVID. And then we would just kind of leave in groups at BC and go, there's 3 different routes. And that really got me out of bed. I would be out of bed at 4:45 for 10 years, and morning glory rides were my treat. So definitely helped push myself more than just on my own. But I'm doing probably the same loop you are now with riding out to Etobicoke and back on the lake shore and on my bike. So we'll have to meet up.
That's great. I'll trade Strava routes with you.
Yeah, there we go.
And so in terms of setting goals, this is an interesting segue to another comment I read, because originally the way I had framed this question was, what was life like growing up, and were there seeds of wanting to build a company? And one of the other interviews I read, it's at the age of 11, you told your parents, is like, I want to run my own company. Do you remember where that's a very fun story to remember. Do you remember when you were a kid back then? Like, what did you envision that to mean? What did you want to start?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't know what it meant. And I went to engineering school after that when I went to university. And still at that point, I didn't know what business was. Like, the whole concept of starting either in a consumer packaged goods and business or in a consulting firm. I had no kind of concept of business. I was just pretty focus on numbers, and I knew I didn't want to be an engineer, and I had a knack with numbers, so I figured I'll try business. So I didn't really kind of have a path. Like today, my kids are 21 and 16, and there's a whole kind of pathway to career planning, and there's counselors and advisors, and you can do all this research. And there was not much of that. I grew up in a small apartment. I shared a bedroom with my mom for 13 years. I had twin brother. We're both adopted, so we're adopted together. I was just reading a lot of books. Like my mom was a single mom, so she worked as a secretary, and she would, in the summer we were on our own. So we kind of go down outside and throw a ball around and try to stay out of trouble in our neighborhood. Or I read a lot. So I think it's a combination of, I read a couple of books that were, known to be kind of not the romance novels, but the inspiring romance novels, bestsellers. There's quite a few kind of stories around the heroine woman who was a successful businesswoman and built this empire and And, I think it's really as simple as kind of those cheesy books, I guess, back then that kind of got my imagination going. And I think, so I just kind of knew, I knew, like anyone who knows me in my teens and 20s, and, I've always been a little bit quirky and certainly very passionate. So I kind of knew inside there was something fueling me. But I took the conservative path of like going to like one of the best CPGs and learning how to build brands, and and then you kind of like you buy your first house, and I had my daughter, and then I separated, and it's like, oh my God, like it's just the time was never right. And in my 30s and 40s, the women mentors I had were more like, I didn't, networking back then was very different, because you didn't have the access you have. But, I was told that the three kind of rules to figure out if you should move from being, in big corporate to entrepreneurs were: one, well, you need an idea. So I didn't have an idea. And two, you need money. And three, you need time. So I didn't have either. So it was perfect. I kept collecting my paycheck and said, I don't have either, so I can't, go in this direction. But then I was pushing late 40s, and I'd been doing a lot of consulting for 2 years to founders. So I worked for 7 different CEOs. And then I realized, whoa, wait a minute. And the world's been opening up to startups. So the world wasn't this friendly 10 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done 10 years ago. Just because the market dynamics weren't the same. So it just kind of, I kind of had my PowerPoint under my arm, and I was going to the natural health shows. I was doing consulting, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Now I have an idea. Now I have a little bit of money saved, and now my kids are a little bit older. I still didn't see much of them, but I didn't have as much of the mother's guilt because they were a little bit older, and they were able to make their mac and cheese on their own.
They're a bit self-sufficient.
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, because the founding story of the business is very interesting to me, but there's a few nuggets I wanted to dig on. In one, when you mentioned reading just books, and I find there's lots of books that I think are timeless. And I'm curious, is there a story or a book that stood out to you that you still remember today from back then?
Bradford Ann Taylor, I don't know. I think she's still writing or something and still popular and still has bestsellers, but it was kind of those type of series, and kind of the same type of books that would go with, the miniseries Dallas and those kind of like over the top kind of stories. Just really gets the imagination. I went to Disney for the first time. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, so went to Disney's for the first time when I graduated. And, that's kind of, there's a lot of pros and cons, but like fostering the imagination is what, Disney does. And so when I brought my daughter the first time, like, by day 2, you kind of see what imagination and the power of imagination and having a dream and pursuing that. It's so incredible. So it comes in a lot of different forms because of my background and kind of the times I was in. It just came in the form of some of these books. Today, there's it's so exciting for like teens and young adults, because with social media and all of the different apps, like you're able to get connected to thousands. You're able to see ideas, you get support, get inspired. And now there's Founders to Founders series on Clubhouse. I'm giving back a little bit, but I want to give back a lot. So there's a lot of ways to become an entrepreneur now. And through COVID, the percentage of entrepreneurs has gone through the roof, and particularly women entrepreneur. So the world has changed a lot. And that's, something we really need to foster and figure out a way to support all of the founders and startups, because it is a big leap. It's risky. Most startups don't succeed.
Yeah.
So finding a way to give back and support it is going to be more and more key.
Yeah. Well, I think it too. It's knowing it's a low percentage chance of success for many things is why you have to have a lot of shots and attempts. And some things don't even become companies. They don't even be like maybe they stop at the idea phase or the testing phase or whatnot. And you just need to work that muscle if you've never done it before.
Yep.
And I know you mentioned you'd followed like a pretty conservative path kind of leading up to your first job at P&G, but did you ever have like a little side hustle? I know it sounded like you worked some interesting first jobs and stuff like that to make money on the side, but was there any like looking back, I illustrate a pattern match backwards. Did you ever try to start a club or anything? Was there a
No, I wasn't. I read Elon Musk's book and all the famous entrepreneurs, and I'm like, I didn't have that much of the like all of the entrepreneur nuggets. You see, the 10-year-olds with their lemonade stand and they're saving hundreds of thousands of animal lives and stuff. So I didn't have that as much. Like I really did. My first job was cleaning the washrooms at Harvey's, and I had 3 jobs through university, cash register, and then I started a little. Oh, I guess in university you could say I was running the company that was giving loans out on behalf of the government. For computers. So that was probably like I was a little general manager of this company that we set up at McGill to help students buy computers, because back then computers were pretty expensive. So the government gave free loans for the 4 years. So a little bit of that, but it was more like if you kind of look through my 20, 25 years of working, I was an entrepreneur. So I was clearly in, at the packaged goods companies, P&G, Frito-Lay, Heinz. I didn't stay in the same place for 10 years. I would kind of be the problem fixer. I learned the basics, and then I was like, oh, okay, there's a problem at Frito-Lay, Doritos, launching Tostitos. I'm going to go fix that. Oh, 4 years. Now I'm a bit bored. I get a phone call. Oh, there's a problem to fix at Heinz. The brand ketchup's been declining for 10 years, Oh, get a phone call. Weight Watchers has been declining for 10 years. Oh, recruiter. Yeah. So I clearly, became inside. I said, oh, I'm a change agent. But really what it was is I was an entrepreneur, and I was, I'm not kind of the best to be a 20-year veteran at a, like a CPG. I would be coming in and fueled by solving the problem that no one had solved before. And it's always the same principles, people, processes, and your brand, your positioning of your brand usually. So I kind of tackled all of these career moves and challenges with those 3 Ps. And sometimes, it takes a couple of years, Heinz Ketchup, in the end, I was there 4 years, and it's by year 3 that it just took off and the profit was up, multiple digits. But you have to put the right building blocks in place. You can't just kind of, come in and say, okay, overnight, if a brand's been declining for 10 years, you got to kind of put some right steps in place. So that really kind of was foundation to why is a brand not growing? I did launch new brands in Canada and in the US because I worked for 2 hyper growth startups in between. The big kind of better known brands. So I was like, wow, you can get from 0 to 10 million and 10 to 100 million. And I was there, when the monthly sales went from 1 to 10 million. I was like, whoa, but it's kind of hyper growth startups are pretty intense. Yeah. And we had similar growth with, with the first year with 8 million and the second year with 47 million.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
So I kind of lived, but this was my 3rd hyper growth, and it's quite different than, there's many brands, natural brands that are 10 years, 7 years in the making. Going to 47 million in 24 or 27 months is just, it's a different culture. It's a different pace. You have to make a lot of decisions with not a lot of information. You have to kind of, you have new team members all the time. Not necessarily everyone has the same expertise. Not everyone knows the similar processes, understands the dynamics with the brand. So it's not for the faint of heart. But then we kind of had COVID hit. So, we had a growth phase, hyper growth, launch and growth phase, hyper growth, quite intense phase. And then we had, COVID. So it allowed us to catch our breath. We had to right size a little bit and kind of take the time to put some more processes in place and get the right team in place and kind of go back to doing some of the things that we hadn't had a chance to do when we were barely able
just
to.
Barely holding on as the rocket flies. But I think this is so interesting because it's you kind of answered the question that I had of, in this short 3 years, which is, why startups and small companies operate at the, I always call it a 1 year in startup life is 10 years in big company life. Is your experience at Kraft with Heinz is not that the brand is declining, but COVID was just a decline for the whole world, right? And so in a macro sense, you have to deal with a lot of stuff is happening that is putting a damper on all businesses across the board. How do I rebuild and re-strategize there? The middle phase is your kind of, oh wow, I've kind of scaled it and how do I hold on for dear life at a probably a factor of magnitude larger than you've ever done before. And then starting, I think that there's certain elements you've launched it, but I would love to jump back to that origin story because there's challenges throughout all these things, but I was just very inspired to hear your story about how you came up with the idea and you actually put down a lot of money and then you basically were out $80,000, which is which is crazy. And so however you want to tell the story, I'm just curious, what was that 3 months leading up to putting in that order and what gave you that conviction to do that? And then we can go from there.
Well, the startup story, now I kind of look back and I'm like, I am crazy. I had 2 kids to put in as a single mom to get through university, and I was paying child support. And I just, I kind of took this crazy chance. I took all my savings. I was pouring that in, and then I was phasing out of my consulting because you can't, you can't. You have to put in time. So I was kind of putting in the time, looking for a partner, didn't really find another partner that wanted to give up the, you're in your mid 40s, you have this big paycheck and give that up to kind of do the startup stuff. So a lot of people loved my idea, but
Mhm.
I wasn't finding someone who would kind of come in, 50-50 and say, okay, like, let's do this. So in retrospect, I don't know now, maybe I'm tired of age if I go and do the same thing. It was crazy, but it started with, getting off the plane in March 2016. I read Nina Teicholz's book, Big Fat Surprise, and it said, oh my goodness, we've all been misinformed. We've all been misled.
Mhm.
Fat is not that. Actually, you need fats, and we've been misinformed. Sugar is the enemy and the culprit.
Mhm.
So and because I tried to kind of lose 15, 20 pounds for 20 years, I was addicted to sugar. I often say my mom surely bottle fed me maple syrup because I grew up in Quebec. Like, I was addicted.
Yeah.
You would think I was doing Ironman so that I could kind of have double desserts.
Is it called
Like,
the Cabe de Sucre?
oui, le cabane de
Yes,
sucre.
yes.
Yeah. Like, I was so addicted to sugar. Like, it was
Yeah.
crazy. I would do like a 5-hour bike ride in the summer. And then that night it was like, okay, now I have double brownies. Like, it's so crazy. And I was having sugar on the bike, carbs and sugar on the bike. And so, but I got to mid 40s. I'm reading the book in March. And now, I've been traveling to Vancouver for a contract I was doing. I had a couple of other contracts in the US, and I was like, go. And I was just like flattened. Like, my blood pressure was no longer under control. So I had to take meds. My doctor was like, oh, well, it's genetic. Like, after 5 years of trying to, DASH diet, cut salt, blah, 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 wasn't working because I was cutting fat. I have kind of tummy inflammation. I guess I would just get, I just get kind of bloated and miserable, but catch-all name of IBS. But I'd get pretty miserable.
Mhm.
And I was just a mess. So I kind of read this book and I'm like, okay. And I hadn't done Ironman for like a year and a half or 2 years. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to start loading up on fats like now. I'm walking the show. So there's lots of opportunities to get fats. I'm not, because there was like butters and a bunch of meats, but, and then I'm really, really going to try to cut sugar. And that's the first time that after 10 times of saying, okay, now I'm going to go 30 days and cut sugar.
Mhm.
I really, I didn't eat sugar for 2-3 weeks. And I still have a little bit of Splenda in my coffee, but don't shoot me. I'm gonna get all these comments. It's like phasing out of the sweetness in the coffee. But I just cut, and it's incredible. Like, within a month, my sugar cravings that I've had for 40 years were gone.
Mhm.
And then I started being better with even reducing more and more carbs. So
Mhm.
it just, like, it's gradual. Keto didn't really exist. So it's not as if, I would listen to podcasts and try to go keto tomorrow. It wasn't really at the forefront in March 2016.
Yeah.
So for me, that path, and then I did a little bit of intermittent fasting. So now I don't really eat breakfast anymore. But I tried intermittent fasting 3 times. The first 2 times, oh no, I have IBS. Like, my tummy needs food every 2 hours, which was part of the issue. But we're so misinformed. So it doesn't work for me. And then the third time, probably a year later, when I tried again, just to basically skip breakfast. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. My blood pressure within 2 weeks plummeted. So I had to get off my meds, and I was like the happiest person on the planet.
Dude, and sorry to interrupt the story, but one thing I'm curious about, was there anything you did differently, either on cutting sugar or intermittent fasting, that you think helped it stick this time?
Just eating fats.
Oh, just
Yeah.
eating fats,
Because,
that was it.
because I was on a low fat diet for 20 years. Well, I was never on a diet. I worked at Weight Watchers. Like, I know, the diets. I was like, my soundbite was, I'm not disciplined enough to diet.
Yeah.
And because I didn't have, a lot of weight to lose, like, it kind of like I was in that, like, I'd like to kind of get fitter. Like, I'm kind of round and I don't, like, cute, chubby, I guess, like, whatever. And I never dieted. I didn't want the constraints of a diet. And I was like, oh, I'll just do a bit more exercise. Oh, I'm fit. But I was not eating fat, because that was way of controlling, what I ate. And I've never counted calories or anything like that, or did counted points. I did a little bit when I was working because I needed to understand the program.
Yeah.
So eating fats just allowed me, like now suddenly my body is satiated. Like I'm not starving. No cravings. Like to this day, like I'll be surrounded with the most decadent, delicious desserts on the planet. And if I'm going to cheat, it's going to be like potato chips, right? Salty carbs,
just savory.
But not sweet. So it's been life changer for me. You know, it's just, I've gone from eating sugar and dreaming about how I can get more sugar to like not even wanting anything sweet in my coffee. So
and so then what's the jumping point between, like, this obviously was life-changing for you. And I feel like I ask this question in every interview, but it's a very common trait amongst all the founders I talk to. For those in the camp of, I had this problem, I solved it or wanted to solve it, and that was the origin story of the company. Given all the context you shared about where you were in your life and all that, it is like kind of insane to be like, you know what, this is great. And like, my solution is I'm going to make my own food bars. And on top of that, it's not like any everyday food bar. I'm going to actually innovate and push manufacturers to come up with something new. Like, just stack all the difficult things on top of each other and go do that.
And put the name fats on the packaging, which my generation of women like or not like, that's a pretty bold thing. It really just, you know, I don't think I believed in myself as much as everyone I was presenting the idea to. So I think that was a big insight. It first started with my little PowerPoint. I was in the hotel room at Expo West and I was Googling USPTO, some potential names, right? I was like, oh, maybe somebody else is going to think about this, because I was at the show and I was looking around this show and I was like, wow, you know, there's 3 macros: fats, protein, and carbs. US already has a protein crave. It took a bit longer because when I was at Weight Watchers, I was like, we need more protein in our products. So now the US has this protein crave. We're never going to go back to a sugar or carb crave. Oh, now you have to, you know, start eating carbs again because carbs are really good for you.
Not a problem for any of us.
That's never, ever going to happen. So the only macronutrient that's left is fats. Like and essential fatty acids have the name essential for a reason. Like the human body needs them in order to live, the same as essential amino acids. You need those essential macronutrients to live. You don't have any essential sugars or essential carbohydrates, and there's a reason for that. So the macronutrient of fats, I knew there was something that, you know, there's going to be another marketer that's either going to read Nina's book. There's 6 other books that came out right after, all kind of saying the same thing. And it's going to say, well, what if we help things along instead of like a 7th book or 10th book? What if there's a brand that stands for the message, which is what happened with Atkins, you know, a few books and a brand that stood for the message of low carb. Chobani, a brand that, you know, went to $1 billion in an eye blink. And it's not because Americans are like, oh, we need to eat Greek yogurt. It's like, well, we need to eat Greek yogurt because it's loaded with protein. And it just, you know, Chobani came when the protein big fat phase was kind of hitting the US finally. So so I knew there was, you know, potential. Gluten-free was a massive trend. I knew there was a potential for a brand to carry the message and be the beacon for let's eat good fats. So I did the safe thing at first. I just started with concepts like consumer research, and in marketing, you write the concept of your brands. You're like, hey, this is the name and this is the insight and this is the benefit, RTB, and the price. And you show that to the consumer and you test that versus other brands. And then you get scores back and you optimize. What if I said this benefit? What if this? What if I change the packaging? So that was kind of safe. And as a marketer, that's what I've done all my career. That's what I was mostly doing in consulting, because positioning and packaging are often, and innovation are often the go-tos to help, you know, change the trajectory of a declining brand. So I went to that. So that was safe. And then I was getting like a stronger and stronger brand proposition. I didn't have samples yet. And then like I was in all my networking meetings, as I was looking for contracts, they were like, no, I want to talk about your idea. And then we'd wind up talking 55 minutes about the idea. And then it became clear that like I've presented to I probably met over 200 people in the first year and a half. And it was like, wow, this is a big idea. How can I help you? And so even though I didn't really believe that I'm actually gonna, risk everything and start a company and do that full time, I like every week I was making progress. So then I had a nudge, and one of the persons by my side was saying, like, get samples. So, did a product brief, did an RFP. I got to find like I was doing stuff in my kitchen, but now I got to commercialize it. So I'm on LinkedIn. Who knows about kitchens? There weren't a lot of kitchens back then. I got these 2 or 3 US kitchens. That would have been a nightmare. You can't ship chocolate back and forth. So I got a kitchen. So I was driving up every week on Wednesdays to Newmarket, tasting the sample. And then I had like 20 co-packers say, no, we can't. I knew the product specs I wanted, like low carb, low sugar, moderate protein and high enough fats. And all the co-packers are like, go away. We can give you a protein bar, but we can't give you a fat bar.
This is a question that actually just came in. So 100% would love, how did you eventually find a co-packer?
Like it's just so hard. So I have a list of whatever the 30 or just probably 60 co-packers I work with. Like, it's really hard. So I had like 30 kind of say, no. And I had one co-packer say, your formulas would never even come on my line. They would wreck my equipment. And I was like, what? They would wreck your equipment. So this was the messaging I was getting. But I had one co-packer in Quebec that said, you know what, like we dabbled around with a bar that had higher fat, and we can help you. So one guy kind of had belief and faith in the idea, and he took these kind of recipes from the food lab, which were not really commercial ready, but he's like, okay, let me fix all this. And then he worked from there. We did about 80 different recipes. So we had 4 different bar flavors, and we had to iterate. And it was just melted mush. Like by the time he'd do some samples, and they'd come get to my house in Toronto, and then I'd be on the counter and then they would just melt. So it was really hard. Or they had, 5-6 grams of sugar. I'm like, nope, 1 to 2 grams, not 5-6. Like, lots of bars can have 5-6, but that's you're in the spectrum of a candy bar. Like, I don't want a candy bar. I want like low 1 to 2 grams of sugar. So everyone was saying I was crazy. So we kept iterating. And we got to a place after 3 or 4 months that we like, he was borderline going to give up. And my living room was filled with foil samples. And then we got to a pretty good place. He made 1,000 on the line. I took them, to Whole Foods and to UNFI and to the other distributor, Purity. And they all said, oh my God, these are so delicious.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, cool. Now I'm ordering, packaging. It's coming from Korea, and I'm spending money on the ingredients. I'm signing purchase order, manufacturing agreements. And then I show up April 26th in Montreal with my blue t-shirt, Love Good Fats. I was at my mom's the night before. We're taking pictures. Full production fail. 12 hours on the plant floor. Impossible. The bars just won't bind. Because sugar is a binder. So then I drove home at midnight. I had a rented car because back then I was driving a little Honda Fit with no air conditioning. So I couldn't bring back samples from Montreal.
Guaranteed it'll melt in that case.
No, I was just like, so I had rented a car and I got home at midnight and I was just, bawling. And I hit the phone. I had raised a little bit of money. So I was not ready to give up. Like, Whole Foods was waiting, UNFI was waiting. And I just made a bunch of phone calls. And one of the phone calls I made was someone who had said no, who said, you know what, I got to the owner and he said, well, we've been making, bars for 50 years. We've never had a bar we couldn't make. Let me give it a shot with the team. And that's the beginning of $100 million of sales later.
And I mean, that's amazing and like heart sinking, but then you found obviously an amazing partner to build it with you. What do you think changed with the partner that ended up building it? Like what changed in terms of the business, the pitch? Like, you sounds like you talked to the owner this time. How did you convince him the second time around?
Yeah, well, the big thing is with nearly a year of recipes and on the phone with 30 co-packers, I was kind of very quickly becoming one of the best experts in North America on fats. So I went to 3-4 of the ingredient shows, 3-4 of the supply shows. I partnered with 2 PhDs in lipids, one Dr. Marangoni, which a lot of people know in Canada because he's quoted all the time. He's quoted on the latest Buttergate we had here. And then one who is a head researcher of the largest fat lipids company in the world. So I got these 2 guys together, and of course they knew each other. And I was working with this expert on coating who'd been doing coatings for 20 years. So he knew a little bit about coatings that didn't have sugar in them, because chocolate coatings has, fats and sugars.
Hey there.
I didn't want sugars. Sorry, that's my little doggy. It's been a busy day today on the street. So I just, combination. And then we kind of figured out that, because no one had done this before. So you kind of had to get the chemistry of fats. We have, 2 types of kind of main families of fats, the linoleic and non-linoleic fats that live together and they don't get along. And no binders. So you how do you get the fat to attach when fiber is not a binder, sugar and carbs are binders, but we didn't have any. So, unanimously every phone call after the 30-second introduction was, how are they going to bind? And so then I would go through the whole thing. And we needed a piece of equipment that not all co-packers have. So it's the combination of the chemistry of the bar and understanding fats at a molecular level. And that allowed us to get a SHRED grant because we've done something no one's done before in Canada and get the right equipment.
And so then did you actually buy the equipment for that co-packer, or you had to convince them to
No, they had it. They had it. So
wow.
you have a little bit of luck sometimes. They're 20 minutes in my backyard. They had the right piece of equipment. They have an amazing team. You can just take those and kind of just be grateful for things just coming together.
and so it sounds like your first customer technically Whole Foods?
Yeah. Yeah. So the buyer at Whole Foods said, wow, and first kind of confirmed listings, but also I'm in Toronto. So in Ontario, there's a dozen incredible natural health banners, incredible, large scale, 5, 10, 20, 30 store banners in Ontario. So I had a broker, and then that didn't work out. So I wound up with another broker, and then every natural health food store I presented to listed us right away. So we knew, and then you're at UNFI and Purity. So then you kind of have you're listed with the banners, including Whole Foods. That's very supportive of entrepreneurs and new ideas. And we were all kind of listed for the April launch, which I had to go and call everybody and say, we're delaying it 4 months and 11 weeks, 12 weeks we were delaying it. And then, so they were all anxiously waiting. The paperwork was all done. We were ready to go, but that would have been the last chance. If I'd come back and delayed it again, they probably would have said no, because the bars were melting. The samples I had were melting. So it was kind of A, the samples are melting, and B, you can't make them. So it would have been dead. But thankfully, we were able to kind of get the fats to bind in a magical way. Creates a truffle-like bar. It's like no other product out there. You chew in the bar, you taste it, take a bite. Yeah, it just melts. So everyone was like, wow. I myself went to pretty much every single natural store that was opening. I would bring the bars to the grocery manager, and I would ask to videotape them when they took the first bite, and they were all like, what? Really? What if I don't like it? Are you still going to put it on Facebook? I'm like, yep. Yeah. And every single one of them, I had the most incredible testimonials. And then I had a few people say, like, don't put the staff on Facebook.
That's okay.
When you're startup, you kind of try little things.
Yeah.
So it was fun. Like, it was a lot of fun. So I even flew to BC and I did a whole tour 3 months in, and I trained 7 stores out of an amazing chain out there. So I kind of spent like 5 days driving in the interior to go to a chain to train the whole staff, like one by one. So, and then we rapidly adapt. What you have to kind of remember is that, like, now we had like the first production, half of it was discarded and went to food bank because it wasn't meeting the specs, and the other half, like, it was too chewy, etc. But then we knew we had something, so boom, we got on the shelf at Whole Foods the September 2nd, whatever that weekend was, and I did demos myself the Saturday, Sunday. By October 16th, the largest Whole Foods in Canada, or second largest in Canada, downtown Toronto, said, "You're my number 1 and 2 best-selling bars." So that was like, woo, like, holy. So then we had 2 more flavors that were ready to go. Boom, I launched 2 flavors. Like, October, we were producing January 15 or so. So I was like record. Now we had 4 bars. And now we moved to Acosta, and then the rest is history. We went from 50,000 a month, 40,000 a month in POs to $1 million, like, within like 12 months. Like, it was crazy.
And the reason I'm so fascinated by this, because a lot of the folks we typically I've been chatting with down here are, most of their businesses built D2C.
Yeah.
But as many D2C businesses gain maturity, retail and wholesale ends up being a very key part, if not the bigger part of their business. And I'd say it's rarer to find entrepreneurs that start in retail, mainly because it's not a skill set that many people have. It's hard to test and learn in it if you haven't done it before. And one answer very clearly is you had a differentiated product that, like, met a need for the buyer. And maybe there's more you can talk about that, but for people that are watching who would like to replicate this playbook in some way, shape, or form, what are there any other kind of key takeaways or things you would put as your table of contents on a course on, like, how do I get, I'm going to put the clickbait headline, get listed in Whole Foods on day 1. What are the keys to doing that?
Well, the model for, if you want to be in retail, is to go to the natural banners. So if you're fortunate enough to be in Canada, between the West Coast and Ontario and Quebec, there's so many local banners that will support you. So, in Ottawa too. So, like, go to your local banners to get, I had someone tell me get into 100 stores. And you can do that in Canada, in these 4 cities, because the stores are really supportive. Now, you have to have positioning, product, price, value. You kind of have to have that nailed. And then you have to have your cash flow modeled out a bit. So, what's the positioning of my brand? What's the product? And does it deliver on the promise of the positioning? And do I have the right price value equation that the consumer is gonna say that works for me? So kind of the 3 checklists that, you learn on your first day at P&G back then. So you want to get that right. I was looking for co-mans and bars, and all of them had minimums of 100,000. So, and the larger co-packers, it's 200,000. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of forced in a dynamic of, like, look, like, I know the market because I've been in natural for 5 years. I've been in CPG for 25. So, and I know that natural then leads to conventional chains and then club and mass. So that's been my career. So I kind of knew that space. Mm-hmm. I didn't know the B2C that much. I spent a lot of time in B2C when I was at Weight Watchers, and they had a great online platform with .com, but I didn't know that as much. At the same time that I launched, there's other brands that launched mostly online. So there's big brands that were, started to say they were keto in 18, and they just went online. So I was kind of building the brand in retail, and they were online, and they were growing pretty fast, innovating. They must have had different co-mans, because in bars they were able to, have many flavors. And I don't know if they had the same minimum runs, and they had powders. A lot of them did powders and different things. So, this was kind of more my space. from a really kind of like bigger picture perspective, like from a consumer brand, if you want to build a brand of scale, have the higher multiplier, and eventually exit one way or the other, one of the checklists is to be in retail. Mm-hmm. So it's just there's not been as many, or I can't think of any kind of exits of big food brands that are D2C. So if you don't start there and you learn your way, that's fine, but you do want to get there if you kind of want that type of potential. And I was kind of raising angel funding and equity, so part of the plan for me was I had to kind of refund that, so I need exit eventually. So everyone has a different path. There's brands that have been 10 years and they're in 50 stores, 100 stores, or they're B2C, or they're just Amazon. Like, everyone has a different path. And if you don't raise money and you kind of do it just on your own, then you can follow the path that makes sense for your cash flow. But for us, there was really, really high demand. So the path I took kind of made sense with the product I had, and it kind of worked out.
Exactly. We have, I think you have a friend here on watching on one of our channels. There's a few of you out there.
There we go.
One question we quickly glossed over that I wanted to make sure I asked was on that initial funding. You said you'd raised some initial angel capital. At what point in the business did they come in, and how did you find your first check in?
Like, it's really, it's friends and family is what everyone told me. And I kind of read a couple of the startup books, and I didn't have any rich friends or certainly family, but I had, contacts, and it was really just with my PowerPoint under my arm. And I would just kind of meet and say like, what, and then I had 400 LinkedIn contacts. I hadn't done networking in 10 years. But I just kind of started and said, I have an idea. And then everyone I would meet, like I had like, okay, can you help me? Or what do you think? Can you help me? Do you know somebody? And it didn't take long that I kind of found once I found the gentleman that said, I believe in you and I'll be on your board. And he wound up being my chair, and he still is my chair today. Then with his name attached saying, I'll put the first little bit of money, and he didn't put in a lot of money, just support. Then I got enough to kind of do my, my first round. So I had, 10 to 50,000 investments to up to 400 for the first round. And then once I did the first round, and the bars, within 6 weeks were number 1 and 2 selling, then like, boom, was able to do another round. Like, we had 2 rounds that, we wanted to raise $1 million, and we got 3.5. We wanted to raise 2, we got 5. Yeah. So after that, once you have velocities, listings is the first step. Velocities is this key. So once we had velocities, then it was fairly easy to continue to raise.
Yeah, well, the step up, I'm trying to do the math right now. It's about like you 5x the sales. Is it 8 to 47? You said?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
it was
pretty good. Yeah, everyone must feel pretty good about putting their checks in.
We were humbled. We're very humbled with COVID. So we kind of had some big partners at Costco, and Costco's just removed most of the bars. So definitely very difficult last 12 months. So we're, grinding at it. We had to right size multiple times. We're not out of the woods, but we did what we needed to do to protect the brand and be poised for growth again.
And that's kind of where I would love to finish off, as we're kind of coming up on time. As you look at, the balance of this year going into next year, what are some of at least the things that you could talk about openly here? What are some of the things that you're excited about, that you're placing bets on? what are things that we should be thinking about as supporters of the brand, of how we can help?
Well, you can definitely, continue to buy the bars and try all of our flavors. We have many, many multiple banners in Canada that have all of our 10 flavors on the shelf. We're poised for growth coming out of COVID. Like there's already some banners that are leaning in. We're going to have, big displays and a lot of big banners in June and July, which is kind of incredible because for the last 12 months, there's been no displays. Bars are on the go, and on the go has not been selling. So as we kind of get out there and rediscover, have, good summer, back to school, and then at January, a lot of people have put on a lot of weight. They've been inside. Time to get back out, get on the go, grab our bars, try all of our flavors, and we have innovation coming.
Yeah. Well, I guess we have to stay tuned for that. Everyone, please check out lovegoodfats.ca and follow on Instagram and YouTube and all the different places you can follow on below. And maybe the last piece is more personally for you. Is there anything you're excited about? Are you doing another Ironman? What's the new outlet for you in your personal life?
I'm biking, not Ironman. I think I'd get divorced if that happens. And
run a company and train. It's
but I'm tired. Like it's been but just, I'm back into biking and running and trying to, it's really inspiring when you get the little flywheel of getting a little bit fitter. So I'm kind of getting there a little bit. We have an amazing team of the senior leadership team, and we have a couple of new recent players. So it's really exciting to kind of have that gel and kind of have a little kick butt team with 5 women and 2 men on the team. And that's really, really, value diversity. And I'm really excited about the potential of the little high performing machine we've kind of put in place.
For how much sales you generate, that is an incredibly lean team. So massive congratulations.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, with that, again, thank you for sharing your story. There's so much. It's mostly I'll kind of flash these here as we're finishing off. Not a lot of questions, but a lot of comments of just people super excited about your story and everything that you're building and doing. So, Suzie, thank you for building an amazing company, an amazing bar, an amazing snack that has kept me fed and nourished before all of my classes. And I can't wait. So everyone, please tune in. I think next Monday, we'll be doing our next conversation. And Suzie, thank you, and hope you have an amazing rest of your day and week.
Thanks, Daniel.
Awesome.